The day started with sunlight that looked harmless, the kind that slips quietly through window blinds and fools you into thinking everything will be simple. I woke before my son did, listening to the slow rhythm of his breathing. That soft whistling sound only 7-year-olds can make when they sleep too hard and dream too deep. His small hand was curled around the strap of his backpack, as if he feared the world might take it away. I brushed the hair from his forehead and whispered, "Wake up, Noam, we can't miss the flight." He groaned, pulled the blanket over his head and mumbled, 5 more minutes. Ima. Ima. The word that always made me both softer and stronger at the same time. The airport smelled like coffee, metal, and impatience. People moved with purpose, dragging suitcases that sounded like small storms across the tiles. I kept one hand on Noam's shoulder, the other clutching our worn leather passport holder. I had checked everything twice, maybe 3 times. Tickets, documents, medication, snacks for the plane. When you travel alone with a child, preparation becomes armor. The security line twisted like a slow snake. I could feel the heat of other people's nerves. The hum of announcements in Hebrew and English blurred together like background music for anxiety. It's just a flight, I told myself. Just a mother and her son going home. But as we approached the checkpoint, the soldier's eyes grew sharper. A young woman in uniform motioned for me to step aside. "Random inspection," she said, her tone careful, trained. I nodded. We were used to this. Traveling with dual citizenship always meant extra questions, extra searches, extra time. Noam squeezed my hand. "Are we in trouble?" "Of course not," I whispered. "They're just doing their job." But something in her gaze made my stomach tighten. She spoke quickly into her radio, and within minutes, another soldier approached, a tall man with close-cropped hair and the kind of posture that made space obey him. He glanced at our passports, then at me. "Ma'am, I'll need you to come with us." "Is there a problem?" He didn't answer right away. "It's just procedure," he said finally. "We'll take you to a private room." I wanted to believe him. They led us through a door marked "Authorized Personnel Only" and down a narrow hallway that smelled faintly of disinfectant and cold metal. The room they brought us to had no windows, only a table, 3 chairs, and a single humming fluorescent light. I felt my pulse in my throat. "Please sit," the soldier said. Noam climbed onto the chair beside me, his legs too short to reach the floor. He looked at the walls like they might start talking. I tried to smile at him, the way mothers do when they need to pretend that everything is fine. The young female officer placed our passports on the table and began speaking in rapid Hebrew to the soldier. I caught fragments. Name flagged, secondary check, identification discrepancy. Words that tasted like fear. Finally, she turned to me. "Mrs. Avrahami, you've traveled frequently this year?" "Yes," I said carefully. "I work for a humanitarian aid organization. We coordinate supplies for border hospitals." She nodded, making notes. "And your husband?" I hesitated. "He passed away." Her pen stopped moving. The room grew quiet enough to hear the light buzzing. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said, but her tone had shifted. Colder, more cautious. The male soldier studied me now, his brow furrowed. "Where exactly did he serve?" I swallowed. "Golani Brigade. Reserve duty." He leaned forward. "Name?" "Captain Yaron Avrahami." The silence that followed felt like the air itself had stopped breathing. The soldier's expression changed, barely, but I saw it. Recognition, maybe. Or pain. He straightened. "Wait here." Then he left the room. Noam whispered, Did we do something bad?" "No, sweetie," I said, brushing his hair back. Sometimes adults just take too long to understand things. Minutes turned into an hour. The clock on the wall had no second hand, just a relentless ticking. I thought about all the flights I'd taken alone after Yaron's death, the endless forms, the questions about why a widow was traveling with a child. Every time I carried proof, death certificate, marriage license, letters from the organization. Proof that I was not a liar, not a threat, just a mother trying to live in a world that keeps making you prove your pain. When the door opened again, the soldier returned with another officer, older, higher rank. The new one's expression was unreadable, the kind of face that's been taught to hide both sympathy and suspicion. He sat across from me, folded his hands. "Mrs. Avrahami," he began, "we need to clarify something. You said your husband was Captain Yaron Avrahami, correct?" "Yes." He exchanged a quick glance with the younger soldier. "We have a record of Captain Avrahami, killed in service 5 years ago near the border." My throat closed. "That's correct." "And you were present at his memorial?" I nodded. I gave the eulogy. He leaned back, frowning. "Then perhaps you can explain this." He slid a folder across the table. Inside was a photograph, grainy, black and white. A checkpoint. A woman holding a small boy's hand. The caption underneath, subject identified as possible alias. Connection to known border group. My chest went cold. That's me, I said. But I was there delivering medical supplies. You can ask the Red Star staff. He held up a hand. Please. Let me finish. He pointed to my necklace, the small silver pendant resting just above my collarbone. Where did you get that? I blinked, confused. This? It was my husband's. His mother gave it to me before he deployed. It's the Star of David inside a circle. He wore it every day. The younger soldier stepped closer, his eyes fixed on it now. Something in his face cracked open. He whispered something too softly for the other officer to hear. What? I asked. He shook his head quickly, regaining his composure. Nothing. But his hands were trembling. They made a few more calls, asked the same questions again in different words, as if repetition could reveal a lie that wasn't there. Finally, the older officer stood. You'll need to wait here until we verify your statement, he said. It may take some time. How long? As long as it takes. He left, the door locking behind him. Noam leaned against me, sleepy now. I held him close, feeling his heartbeat against mine, counting it the way you count time when you have no control over it. I thought about Yaren, about the last time I saw him, the morning he left for his final deployment. He'd kissed my forehead, slipped the necklace into my hand, and said, for protection. If anything ever happens, you'll know I'm still with you. At the time, I thought it was just something soldiers said to make leaving sound less final. Now, sitting in that windowless room under fluorescent light, with strangers questioning who I was and where I belonged, I touched the pendant and whispered, stay with me. Yaren, just one more time? When the door finally opened again, the young soldier stepped in alone. He looked different, pale, shaken. He sat across from me, avoiding my eyes. Mrs. Avrahami, he said quietly, I need to ask one more question. Of course. This necklace. He hesitated, then met my gaze. Do you know a woman named Dina Ben Eliyahu? The name hit me like a whisper from a dream. Yes, I said slowly. She was Yaren's mother. She passed away last year. He swallowed hard. She was my aunt. The room went silent. My hand went instinctively to my chest. The metal felt warm against my skin, almost alive. He looked at the pendant again, his voice breaking. I remember that necklace. I gave it to her when I was a kid. A gift I bought with my first soldier's salary. I didn't know she'd passed it to your husband. I stared at him, realization dawning like light under a locked door. You're Eli, I whispered. He nodded, tears welling. I thought you were gone too. They told us the whole family moved abroad. I never imagined. He exhaled, a sound caught between grief and relief. I'll fix this, he said firmly. You shouldn't have been detained. He stood, straightened his uniform, and went to the door. Before leaving, he paused. I'm sorry, Aunt Dina would never forgive me if she knew I scared you. When the door closed, I held my son tighter. It's over, I whispered. But even as I said it, I knew this wasn't just about the necklace. It was about the way memory survives. In metal, in names, in the faces of strangers who remember the same love. And somewhere, in that cold airport room, I felt Yaren's promise breathing again. The light in the room seemed brighter when he came back, even though no one had touched the switch. Maybe it was because I knew his name now. Eli. A family name from a branch I'd never met, carried into the room on a uniform that could have been a wall or a bridge, depending on what came next. He set a paper cup of water in front of me and a boxed juice in front of Noam, and the smallness of that gesture nearly undid me. Mercy always arrives disguised as something disposable. They're processing the clearance, he said, voice steady the way you hold a plate that's too hot. It's not immediate. I need to ask a few things so the record matches what I already know. He had my mother-in-law's eyes, gentle only after they're certain. I nodded. Ask. He glanced at the folder like it was rehearsing being helpful, and then looked at the necklace again, a habit now, like people touch mezuzahs when they pass a door. The photo at the checkpoint. What were you carrying? Catheters, burn dressings, insulin vials in a cooler, formula, I said, the words lining up like inventory. Our organization supports clinics along the fence. We label everything. We log every mile. We beg for signatures from men who don't believe paper matters. His mouth twitched, a cousin of a smile. Paper matters because people make it matter. He slid a black and white photocopy of the checkpoint photo toward me. This is the one that triggered your flag. Someone annotated it poorly months ago. Alias suspected because your last 2 trips used different middle initials. The airline clerk typed my middle name wrong once, I said, heat rising to my face. Rivka became R. 1 week later, it was Rivka because the form didn't accept 4 letters. I sent corrections. I see them, he said, tapping a page. They live here. But so does the note. And notes like to outlive apologies. He paused. And then there's this. He laid down another sheet, a grainy scan of an old incident report. Words I knew like scars. Kaye, kept Y Avrahami. My breath shortened, grief's muscle memory. We don't have to. We do, he said gently. Because your name is in the addendum. He pointed to a paragraph. Next of kin notified at CO 640. Wife, El Avrahami, Ne Ashkenazi. Beneath it, another line. Transport request filed by civilian volunteer under alias El Ashkar, cleared by unit medical officer. The world tilted, familiar, and new at once. Ashkar? I said, the syllables foreign in my mouth. He leaned back as if giving me space to walk around an old box. On the morning of the memorial, a civilian, description matches you, requested permission to cross the outer perimeter with a medical van. The unit medic wrote, alias noted, purpose humanitarian, escorted to gate after formalities, and initialed it. He looked up. It wasn't an alias to deceive. It was an alias to pass. I saw it then with a clarity that stung. The week after Yaren's death, when the world was too loud to hear and too slow to help. When the clinic begged for supplies, and someone at a gate told me my maiden name would be read one way and my married one another. When a nurse whispered, take the Arabic spelling. The convoy guard trusts that list. I remembered the way my hands shook while writing ASHKAR on a clipboard, as if changing a letter could trick the grief out of my blood. I didn't think it mattered, I whispered. We had insulin that would die in heat. A name felt like a small thing to lose to keep someone else alive. It mattered to the database, Eli said softly. It didn't matter to the medic who sent you through. He wrote 2 words that saved you today. He turned the page so I could see. In the medic's tight handwriting, known widow. My throat burned. Who? Corporal S. Cohen, he said. He's a paramedic now at Ichilov. I called him just now. He remembers the van. He said you barely spoke. He said your hands were steady, and that scared him more than tears. The fluorescent light hummed as if trying to imitate silence. Noam slurped the last of his juice and leaned his head against my arm, heavy and certain. Eli's eyes softened. He looks like Yaren at that age, he said, without asking permission for the memory that entered the room. Stubborn mouth. Kind eyes he'll pretend not to have. I smiled without meaning to. He hates carrots and loves maps. He hides notes for me in shoes. Yaren used to hide chocolate in the coat closet and swear the house was haunted by a benevolent ghost, Eli said, a laugh lost and found. Aunt Dina pretended to be angry every time. Hearing her name unlatched something inside me. She gave me this necklace the day he deployed, I said, thumb finding the smooth bezel by instinct. Said it had held 3 kinds of luck. I didn't ask what kinds. She would have answered, the luck we make, the luck we waste, and the luck that forgives us, he said, eyes far away. She said it after my first awful week in uniform. I wasn't sure which one I had. We let the room be a kitchen for a moment, full of stories and steam. Then the door opened, and the older officer returned with a stiffness that meant policy had taken a lap around the building and come back hungry. Mrs. Avrahami, he said, we've confirmed your documentation with the clinic and the medic on duty from the incident in the file. The flag remains pending formal correction, but you are cleared to travel today. Relief didn't land. It circled above us, nervous, waiting for a safe runway. Thank you, I said, standing on legs that had forgotten their choreography. He didn't leave. He looked at Eli. Sergeant, he prompted, as if reminding him which room belonged to orders and which to memory. Eli straightened. I'd like to append the record with contextual notes, he said, formal again, but his voice held a remnant of our kitchen. Her crossings were humanitarian. The alias was an adaptive spelling used to expedite a medical convoy. She is next of kin to Captors Avrahami and to my aunt. The older officer's gaze flicked to the necklace and then to my face. Something softened there, a muscle unclenching. Understood, he said. I'll sign the correction. He turned to me, not unkind. You know how it is. We have to ask the questions we wish we didn't have to ask. I nodded. And we have to answer them while holding children who don't understand why we're shaking. He almost smiled. Yes. He left with the folder. The lock clicked, gentler this time, as if even the door had heard enough. I exhaled. Eli didn't. He studied me like a man deciding whether to tell the last truth in the room. When he spoke, it was softer than a prayer. "There's something else," he said. "And I don't know if it helps you today or just hurts less tomorrow." My heartbeat climbed the walls. "Say it." "Euron's last call from the field wasn't to the unit," he said. "It was to a personal number stored under Ema. Not yours. His mother's. He asked her to bring you the necklace because he forgot it on the dresser. He said, if I don't wear it, she must. She arrived at the gate crying. The gate commander refused to let her through. She gave it to me to get to him." He swallowed. "I didn't. We were scrambled before I could. I kept it in my pocket all day like a promise. When the report came, he looked at my pendant as if it were a coastline he knew by heart. I brought it to your door and knocked. You didn't answer. I left it with the neighbor because I couldn't knock twice." For a second, the room was 20 degrees colder. "The neighbor, Maya. She left a note," I said, memory bright and useless. "From family. No signature, no origin, just the weight of metal saying stay. Tears arrived, sensible as winter rain." "I thought she mailed it," I whispered. "I thought it found me on its own." "It did," he said. "It used me." Gnome traced the circle of the pendant with one small finger, as if reading Braille on the map of our lives. "Is Abba still with us?" he asked, free of ceremony the way children free a bird by opening a hand that never closed. I kissed his hair. "In all the ways that matter," I said. Eli looked away, which is how some men let themselves cry. He busied his hands with papers that didn't need straightening. "There's more admin," he said, voice repairing itself. "We'll print your travel clearance and a provisional letter that explains the record until the flag falls off. You'll keep it with your passports. Show it before they ask." "Thank you," I said, the words inadequate but true. He nodded, then hesitated at the door. "My aunt baked almond cake for every leave," he said, a memory arriving like a late guest who still knows where the plates live. "Yaren used to steal the corner before it cooled and then accuse the dog." I laughed, clean and loud enough to surprise the fluorescent bulb into a kinder tone. He accused the dog for everything. He said dogs are willing saints. "They are," Eli said, almost smiling. The printer whirred somewhere down the hall, bureaucratic mana. He went to fetch the papers, leaving the door ajar, a small trust. I held Noam and the medal, both warm, both inexplicable, and let the room be big enough for absence and arrival at once. When Eli returned, he carried a thin stack of documents and 2 lollipops he pretended were official. "For post-interrogation morale," he said, handing one to Noam, who chose the red like always, and saved the green for me without asking if I wanted it. The top page bore an official stamp and a sentence that felt like a hand placed gently on the back. "Cleared. Humanitarian exemption noted." He slid a card across the table, too. "My number. If anyone questions you again about the flag before it's removed, call me from the desk. Put the officer on. I'll explain it to the system." I took the card, the ink still fresh, and thought of how sometimes the gate you fear most is guarded by your own family, unrecognized until a necklace speaks. "Eli," I said, and he looked up quick, as if someone had called him back from a dream. "Thank you for seeing me before the file did." "My aunt would have knocked me on the head if I hadn't," he said, the grief light back in his eyes and not unwelcome. "She used to say, first you look at a person, then you look at their papers, then you look again at the person to see which one tells the truth." He opened the door fully then, letting the corridor's ordinary noise spill in, the rolling bags, the apology announcements, the life we'd put on pause. "Come on, let's get you to your gate." We walked together through the narrow hall, Gnome hopping every third tile because that's how you win invisible games. At the main security desk, the older officer returned our passports with a nod that felt almost like an introduction to a future without rooms like this. We stepped back into the river of travelers, and when the current tried to scatter us, Eli put one careful hand up and the river parted. At the checkpoint, another young soldier glanced at my necklace and then at Eli. He said nothing. Blessings don't always require liturgy. Before we turned toward boarding, Eli touched the doorframe the way religious men touch stone. "If you ever bring supplies again," he said, "call first. I'll clear the route properly. No more borrowed letters." "I don't know if I can keep doing it," I admitted. Every crossing takes a piece of me with it. Then only do it when the piece is one you can give, he said. And when you can't, let someone else carry the box. Noam tugged my sleeve. Ima, are we late? We're right on time, I said, surprising myself by believing it. Eli stepped back, suddenly all uniform and distance again, as if closing a book that had read itself aloud by mistake. Safe flight, Mrs. Abrahami. You can call me Leela, I said. You can call me Eli, he answered, and we both smiled at the obviousness of it. Two names reintroduced by a circle of silver that had waited in too many pockets for this exact moment. We walked away then, and I didn't look back until we reached the turnstile. When I did, he was still there, head bowed, lips moving the way men pray when they pretend they're just thinking. I touched the pendant and let the prayer be ours. That the next door would open because a person had seen a person and not a file, because a boy had asked a true question about a father he would carry like a compass, because a woman had chosen the right name on the wrong day and still been forgiven by the ledger, and because a necklace remembered who it belonged to and did not get lost this time. The gate number glowed like a soft command. We walked toward it. The PA mumbled something forgettable. Noam offered me the green lollipop. I took it, because grief has taught me to accept small sweetness without bargaining. And as we joined the line, I realized the interrogation had ended long before the stamp hit the paper. It ended when a soldier recognized his aunt's love around my neck and decided to believe the person in front of him more than the sentence under her photo. That's the kind of recognition that lets nations breathe for a minute. That's the kind that opens doors without anyone having to say please. The flight back to Tel Aviv should have been uneventful. Noam slept most of the way, his small head resting on my arm, his fingers still sticky from the lollipop Eli had given him. I stared out the window, watching clouds slide past like slow promises. The world below looked peaceful from this height. No checkpoints, no lines, no suspicion. Just light and distance. But peace that comes from altitude disappears the moment your feet touch the ground. When we landed, the terminal was busy, loud, impatient. The hum of home mixed with the nervous energy of a country that never really stops holding its breath. Noam tugged at my sleeve. Are we safe now, Ima? Yes, I said. We're home. But the word home felt heavy, like it had grown too many meanings. The humanitarian office in Tel Aviv was in a narrow building with peeling paint and a coffee machine that hissed like an old cat. I'd worked there since Yaren's death, organizing supply runs for clinics near the border. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave me purpose, something to fix when everything else had broken. The moment I walked in, my supervisor, Amir, looked up from his desk. Lila, finally. We were worried. There was a mix-up at the airport, I said. But it's been cleared, he frowned. Cleared? What kind of mix-up? Security thought my name was flagged. It's resolved now. Family connection. Amir raised an eyebrow. You and your luck, he muttered, then smiled. Glad you're back. We need you. There's a new shipment going out next week. Same route? He nodded. Southern sector, but we'll need to coordinate with the Army again. They changed some protocols after the last incident. The word incident hung between us like smoke. Everyone in this line of work had their euphemisms. Incident, miscommunication, crossfire. Words that tried to sanitize loss. I'll handle it, I said. Send me the paperwork. That evening, after putting Noam to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that had already gone cold. The necklace gleamed faintly under the lamplight. I hadn't taken it off since the airport. Couldn't, really. It wasn't just metal now. It was a line connecting every version of myself. Wife, widow, mother, survivor. I thought of Eli's face when he recognized it. The disbelief, the ache, the apology hiding behind his uniform. He had said, I'll fix this. And he had. But there was more behind his words. Something unfinished. I turned the pendant over in my hand, tracing the small inscription on the back. Kite BVR BMIME at KHNE. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. Yaren had chosen the verse himself. He said it was a reminder that faith wasn't about never drowning. It was about knowing who held you when you did. I hadn't prayed in years, but that night I whispered, Hold me still. Yaren, just long enough to keep going. 2 days later, Eli called. His voice was formal at first, but underneath the words I heard the same careful warmth. Lila, it's Sergeant Ben Eliyahu. The flag on your name has been officially removed. Thank you, I said, smiling into the receiver. You didn't have to call personally. I wanted to, he said. Also, there's something you should know. My heart skipped. What is it? When we were reviewing the old file, I found a note attached to your husband's personal effects. It was marked unclaimed correspondence. It's addressed to you? For a moment, I couldn't breathe. A letter? Yes. It's been sitting in archives for 5 years. I can have it delivered, but what? I'd rather give it to you myself. We met the next afternoon at a small cafe near the old port. The air smelled of salt and roasted coffee. I saw him before he saw me, out of uniform this time, wearing a light blue shirt and jeans. He looked younger, almost uncertain, like a man learning to be someone new. "Lila," he said, standing as I approached. "You look, well," I looked tired, I corrected gently. He smiled. "Then tired suits you." He reached into his satchel and pulled out a small envelope, yellowed at the edges, sealed with brittle tape. My name was written in Yaren's handwriting, the slanted, deliberate script that had once filled grocery lists and love notes and military forms. My eyes blurred immediately. "I don't know what's inside," Eli said softly. "I didn't open it. It was filed in the wrong box. Someone must have missed it during the transfer." I nodded, afraid to trust my voice. "Take your time," he said. I broke the seal slowly, as if tearing it too quickly might erase the man who'd written it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The ink had faded slightly, but the words were unmistakably his. "Lila, if you're reading this, it means I didn't come back. I don't want you to live inside my absence. I want you to live like the world didn't end. Because it didn't. Not as long as you and Noam are still in it. I left the necklace behind on purpose. I thought maybe you'd need its luck more than I would. Tell our son his father loved him so much that love is still the air he breathes. And tell yourself the same." Yaren, I read it twice, then pressed it against my chest. Eli sat quietly, watching the sea. "He wrote those words 2 days before the mission," he said. He was calm. Joked about how the coffee tasted like rust. He said he had a bad feeling, but didn't want to worry the others. We thought he was just tired. I wiped my eyes. He always felt things before they happened. He once said the world hums a warning before it breaks. Eli nodded slowly. He was right. For a long moment, we said nothing. The waves kept moving, as if time itself refused to pause for grief. Finally, I asked, "Why are you still in the army, Eli? After everything?" He hesitated. "Because someone has to be there to remember who we're fighting for. It's easy to forget when the orders pile up." "Do you?" "Sometimes," he admitted. "But then I meet people like you, and I remember." We parted at sunset. Before he left, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. "My aunt kept this," he said. "She wanted you to have it one day." Inside was a silver chain. Thinner, lighter, with a small charm shaped like a dove. "Peace," he said quietly. She believed even the smallest bird can carry it. I closed my fingers around it. Tell her she was right. He smiled, the kind that comes after a long silence. She'd like that. When he walked away, I realized I was standing straighter. The weight of the necklace, the letter, the memories, they no longer dragged me down. They grounded me. That night, after tucking Noam into bed, I pinned Yaren's letter to the wall above the kitchen table. Beside it, I hung the new chain with the dove. And as I looked at both, I realized that grief doesn't vanish when it's understood. It simply becomes quieter, like an old song you still hum without noticing. I sat there for a long time, the soft hum of Tel Aviv outside my window, and whispered, "We're still here. Yaron, we're still passing through the waters." The next morning began with a phone call that rewound the air inside my apartment. It was Eli. His voice was lower than usual, that restrained calm people use when standing too close to something fragile. "Leela, can we meet?" he asked. "Of course," I said. "Is something wrong?" There was a pause before he answered. "Not wrong, just overdue." We met near the Yarkon River at a quiet park where the willow branches touched the water and children's laughter traveled like wind. He was already there, leaning on the railing, not in uniform again. This time he wore a gray jacket, unzipped, his expression unreadable. "I didn't want to call you," he said when I approached, but I couldn't keep it in either. "You said overdue," I reminded him. He nodded and gestured to a bench. We sat. The river shimmered beside us, steady, oblivious. "I went through the archived communications from your husband's last mission," he began, looking straight ahead. "The one near Kerem Shalom. You said once that he had a bad feeling before he left." He wasn't wrong. My stomach tightened. "What happened, Eli?" He ran a hand over his face. There was a miscommunication. an order that never reached the field. The convoy was supposed to wait for backup before entering the zone. But one of our units intercepted a radio message, garbled, incomplete, and thought it was a distress call from civilians trapped inside. Yaren's team volunteered to go ahead. I swallowed. And you? I was in the unit that was supposed to cover them. His words came out slow, deliberate. We were delayed by 40 minutes. Long enough for everything to go wrong. I stared at him, the river turning to glass in my vision. I mean that when the explosion happened, we were still kilometers away. We heard it on the comms. By the time we arrived, he didn't finish. He didn't have to. Silence pressed between us like fog. The sound of children playing in the distance felt almost cruel. I whispered, "You were there?" "Yes," he said. "We recovered the site. I saw," his voice cracked, then steadied. "I saw the necklace. I didn't realize then what it meant. I just knew it was his." He looked at me finally, eyes raw and unguarded. I've carried that guilt for 5 years. Every time I saw my aunt, I thought she could smell it on me. I never told her the truth. She died believing her son died bravely and quickly. But it wasn't quick. It was chaos. And I was too far away to stop it. My throat closed. The world shrank to the sound of wind moving through reeds. "Eli," I whispered, "why are you telling me this?" "Because I saw your face at the airport and realized I was still hiding," he said. "I thought knowing would make it easier." It didn't. The only way to stop drowning in it is to hand it to the person who deserves the truth. He exhaled hard. "I thought you'd hate me." I shook my head slowly. "I don't." "You should." "No, you were a soldier. You followed orders. And you've been punishing yourself for something you couldn't control." He laughed bitterly. "You sound like my aunt." Then she was right. For a moment, neither of us spoke. A child's kite flew overhead, red against the white sky. Noam would have loved it. I said quietly, "Do you think Yaron knew?" Eli hesitated. "He must have." The radio logs show he realized the signal was wrong just before the explosion. He tried to warn the others. A shiver went through me, part grief, part pride. He always protected people, even from the things that would kill him. Eli nodded. He saved 2 soldiers who were pinned behind the vehicle. They made it home. That broke me. I buried my face in my hands, the sound that escaped closer to a prayer than a sob. Eli didn't move closer, but he didn't move away either. He just waited. When I could speak again, I asked, "Why tell me now?" "Because you deserve to know that his death wasn't meaningless. Because I couldn't carry it alone anymore. And because I think he'd want you to forgive me." I lifted my head. "Forgive you for what?" "For surviving." We walked along the river for a while. The sun had begun to sink, gilding the water with a tired light. Every step felt like untangling a knot that had been pulled too tight for too long. At one point, Eli stopped and said, "You know, when I first saw you at the airport, I thought I was seeing my aunt. Same expression, same quiet strength. And then when I realized who you were," he shook his head, "it felt like the past had caught up just to test if I'd learned anything." I smiled faintly. "And have you?" "Maybe. Enough to know that orders aren't always right, and that sometimes the only way to serve something bigger than yourself is to question it." I touched the necklace around my throat. "That's what Yaron believed too. He said loyalty without conscience is just obedience." He said that a lot. "You knew him well?" "Well enough to know he scared the hell out of his superiors," Eli said with a laugh that was half pride, half sadness. He didn't know how to shut up when he saw something wrong. It's probably why I ended up admiring him so much. The sun fell lower, casting long shadows across the river. "Eli," I said softly, "you did what you could. You've been doing it ever since." He turned to me. "And you? What will you do now?" I looked toward the horizon, where the city lights were starting to blink awake. "Keep going. Keep helping. It's what Yaron would have wanted, but this time, I'll do it for myself too." He nodded, like he understood something I hadn't said. Before we parted, he reached into his jacket and took out a small folded map. "These are the routes we use for the southern deliveries. I've marked the safer ones. You won't need to use aliases anymore." I took the map, fingers brushing his. "Thank you." He hesitated, then said, "Lila, there's one more thing." "What is it?" "When the explosion happened, the medic who pulled the survivors out, he told me something I didn't believe at the time. He said Yaron was still conscious for a few minutes. He said your husband told him to find you. To tell you he wasn't afraid." Tears blurred the world again. "He said that?" "Yes, and the medic remembered his last words exactly." Eli paused, his voice trembling. He said, "Tell Lila that love travels faster than fire." I pressed my hand over my mouth, the sound escaping again, too big for the air. Eli looked away, giving me privacy for my grief. When I finally spoke, it was barely a whisper. Then he made it home after all. We stood there until the sky turned violet, the city lights glittering like tiny candles for the dead. "Eli," I said at last. "Thank you. For everything. Even this." He nodded, eyes glistening. "You don't owe me thanks." "Maybe not," I said. "But gratitude isn't a debt. It's a direction." He smiled, a quiet one. "Then I'll follow it." We parted at the park gate. As he walked away, I realized the strange truth about grief. Sometimes it doesn't shrink when shared. It just becomes lighter, like two people carrying the same weight on opposite shoulders. That night, back home, I held the necklace and whispered into the silence. "You were right, Yaron. Even in the fire, love traveled faster. And for the first time in years, I slept without dreaming of smoke. The sky over the Negev was the color of ash and honey, soft gray clouds veiling the sun, gold light trying to push through them. The air smelled like dust and salt, and when the wind rose, it carried whispers of voices that had never stopped speaking here. The border always had that sound, half wind, half memory. It had been 3 months since the day by the river, since the truth about Yaron's last mission had finally stopped haunting the edges of my sleep. Since the letter, the necklace, and the connection between two families had redrawn the lines between grief and grace, and now I was back where it had all begun. The convoy stretched along the road, like a quiet promise. 3 trucks filled with supplies, medical kits, bandages, and boxes labeled humanitarian. I was in the second vehicle, beside a driver named Reem, a young medic with eyes too old for her age. Ahead of us, I could see Eli's Jeep, his window down, arm resting casually on the frame, but his eyes scanning the horizon with a soldier's alertness. He had insisted on accompanying the convoy, though he was technically off duty that week. "You're not crossing that gate without me," he'd said, half joking, half serious. And I hadn't argued. Some crossings you don't do alone. The checkpoint appeared like it always did. Sandbags, barbed wire, a line of soldiers whose expressions mixed exhaustion with suspicion. But when Eli stepped out of his Jeep and flashed his credentials, something shifted. The young guards straightened, greeted him respectfully, and the gate opened with a sound like old metal learning to forgive. As we passed through, Reem murmured, "He must be important." I smiled faintly. "Only to the people who remember what he's done." On the other side of the fence, the world looked different. Smaller somehow, as if distance had weight. The hospital compound was a cluster of concrete buildings surrounded by olive trees that refused to die. I'd been here before, in another life. The nurses remembered me. "The widow," one of them whispered, not unkindly. They didn't need to say which one. We unloaded boxes until the sun began to slide toward the dunes. My hands stung with the rhythm of work. Lift, carry, pass. Every motion felt like penance and peace at once. At one point, Eli came to stand beside me, wiping sweat from his brow. "You work harder than the soldiers," he said. "I'm trying to keep up," I replied. He smiled. "You always did." We stood in silence, watching Reem and the others move the final crates inside. In the distance, the call to prayer drifted from a small village. Low, melodic, full of ache. Eli listened quietly. "That sound used to make me nervous," he admitted. "Now it makes me feel human." "Maybe that's what it was always meant to do," I said. He looked at me then. A softness in his gaze that didn't need translation. "You're different now, Lila. Lighter." I let go. I said simply, "Of what?" "The illusion that I had to carry everything alone." He nodded, and something in him relaxed too. The guilt that had once wrapped around him like armor was loosening, thread by thread. After the work was done, we sat on the steps outside the clinic, sharing a bottle of water and watching the horizon darken. The desert swallows sound at night. All you can hear is wind and your own heart. Eli broke the silence. "Do you ever think about leaving all this behind? The aid work, the travel, the endless crossings?" "Sometimes," I admitted. But then I remember Yaron's letter. "Don't live inside my absence." He didn't want me to stop moving. He wanted me to find life again, even here. He nodded. "He'd be proud of you." I smiled. "And of you." He shook his head. "Maybe one day. Maybe today." We both laughed softly. It wasn't the laughter of joy, but of understanding, the kind that grows in the space where pain used to live. As night fell, one of the local doctors approached me carrying a small parcel wrapped in cloth. "For you," she said. "What is it?" "A thank you gift." "From one of the families you helped years ago." I unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a delicate wooden box carved with the Star of David and a crescent moon intertwined. The kind of craftsmanship you only see when time is a language. Inside the box was a note written in uneven Hebrew. For the woman who crossed without fear, my throat tightened. They remembered. Eli looked down at the box, then at me. "Maybe the world keeps better records than we think." "Only of the right things," I said. He smiled, and the wind carried the moment away. We stayed until the stars appeared. Thousands of them, sharp and unblinking. The desert sky at night makes you feel both insignificant and infinite. Eli tilted his head back. "You know," he said, "when I was a kid, my aunt used to tell me that stars are the prayers that didn't need words. They just glow instead." I looked up, finding one brighter than the rest. "Then I think one of those is Yaren's." "Which one?" "The one that doesn't flicker." He followed my gaze and nodded slowly. "He's stubborn, even in heaven." We both laughed quietly. Before we left, I walked a few meters away from the convoy, to the edge of the sand where the wind erased footprints faster than memory could make them. I took the necklace off for the first time in years. The silver caught the moonlight, the engraving gleaming like a secret finally at peace. Eli called softly behind me. "Lila?" I turned, holding the necklace in my palm. "He doesn't need it to protect me anymore," I said. Eli's voice was barely a whisper. "What will you do with it?" I smiled faintly. "Give it back to the earth that carried him." I knelt down and pressed the pendant into the sand. The wind covered it gently, not like burial, but like blessing. When I stood again, the desert felt quieter, lighter. Eli came to stand beside me. "He'd be proud," he said again. I know. The air was cool, the sky vast, the road home long but no longer lonely. On the drive back, Noam's voice echoed in my head. "Are we safe now, Ima?" And for the first time, I could answer him without hesitation. Yes, we are. Because safety, I realized, isn't about borders or uniforms or flags. It's about the people who choose to see you as human, and the ones who carry your name even when you can't. Eli drove ahead of us, headlights cutting through the dark, leading the way. I followed at a steady pace, not fast, not slow, just enough to keep the light in sight. I touched the faint mark on my neck where the necklace had been and smiled. It wasn't absence I felt there now. It was space. Space for breath, for peace, for what comes next. As the border faded behind us and the first hint of dawn touched the desert sky, I whispered into the quiet cab of the truck. "Thank you, Yaren. Thank you for teaching me how to keep walking." And in the golden light that followed, I could almost hear him answer, not in words, but in the steady hum of the engine. The soft exhale of wind through sand. "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you."